Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to go ahead and call our meeting to order. If I could, I'd like to invite Captain Nugent if he would lead us in prayer before we begin our deliberations this morning.
Let us pray. Dear God, we ask for your guidance this morning in our deliberations or discussions with this meeting. We ask for your divine intervention, and we hope that whatever we do and say in this meeting may be to your liking. We thank you for the privilege of being here and for such a beautiful day. We ask that you would stay with us throughout these proceedings. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Let's go ahead and be seated. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This morning is a continuation of the public hearings that we started back on September 3rd regarding the Auditor General's reports on governance in the Cayman Islands government. We are examining five reports that were issued. Governance in the Cayman Islands government, key messages, a description of the framework, how core government manages resources, the accountability of statutory authorities and government companies, and finally a survey of statutory authorities and government companies' governance. Our first witness this morning is the Deputy Governor, and I know that he has a very tight time frame in terms of his availability to the committee today. So I'd like at this point in time if we could, to summons him to the chamber at this time. Deputy Governor and his advisor, Mr. Peter Goff. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to be here before the committee this morning. For the record, could I ask each of you if you would speak into the microphone, state your name and position for the record?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, members. I'm Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor and Head of the Civil Service.
Peter Goff, Strategic Advisor to the Deputy Governor.
Thank you both. And Deputy Governor, we know that your time is limited, so we want to move straight into questioning you with regard to these reports. If members don't mind, I'd just like to kick it off by just asking you who in the government is responsible for ensuring that the principles of good governance as outlined in the reports of the Auditor General are met.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Her Excellency the Governor has a responsibility for overall good governance, and I would also share in that responsibility in terms of good governance, and we would work with our elected leaders on that as well.
Thank you, sir. I did note as well that, as a generally speaking, I think your public response to the reports indicates that you're in general agreement with the reports. But are there any areas where you disagree with?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have done a significant amount of work, and I know other members have outlined a number of things that we have done, and at some point I would like to go into that as well. There's one area that is, I wouldn't say we're totally in a disagreement with, but there's an area that I think requires a bit of clarification. It talks about sort of leadership in the areas of finance. And yes, while I take the responsibility that I must hold all of our chief officers accountable for their performance, the change from giving the financial secretary role and sort of changing that up and having a minister of finance has changed some of the responsibilities. And while like I said, I believe I am overall in charge of the performance of civil service, the lead in the areas of finance and financial management, I believe, is shared with the Minister of Finance, the FS, and myself. But, I mean, perhaps the Auditor General can speak a little bit more about what he means by that in terms of leadership in that area, but that's how I take it.
Auditor General.
From the perspective of administrative accountability for the actual use of resources, I'd liken the Deputy Governor as the head of the civil service to the equivalent of a CEO in the private sector. And that relationship ultimately always has ultimate accountability for the financial performance of the entity in generalities and ensuring effective administration of that. Whilst obviously the role specifically of a chief financial officer, in this case the CEO and the financial secretary, is the key principal financial individual within the organization, there has to be some sort of accountability in terms of ensuring performance of that role to the CEO in that respect. And that, from my perspective, is the clear role in terms of the deputy governor's role in terms of ensuring that there is clear performance in terms of financial administration and management.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. If
Any further questions for Mr. Deputy Governor on this issue? Okay, well, please proceed then, sir.
what are the obstacles the Deputy Governor find in putting in place management frameworks under the PSML, in regards to the various findings of the audit report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure that they're obstacles. There are a number of things that need to happening, and the good news need to happen, and the good news is that it's happening. First of all, I found it necessary to change some of our priorities since taking office. First thing is that we have to take the reports of our oversight bodies seriously and make sure that we provide detailed responses to the reports. And you would see that that's what we have done in the last couple of years, is that we have provided detailed management responses to the Auditor General reports. But not just provide the management responses, but then it all comes down to making the changes, carrying through the recommendations that he has made, and we have been doing that. And like I said, at some point I would like to 5 minutes to just go through all of the things that we have done since this report, because it is substantial. But the key, and the Auditor General alluded to this, is leadership, and that myself as head of the civil service have to ensure that when the Auditor General makes a recommendation that we accept or is accepted, that it is carried through. Many times everybody says, yes, it's a great idea, but then it doesn't go anywhere. So what I have done is to, as part of the performance management systems that we have, in the chief officer's performance agreement, there was a section there saying compliance with our oversight bodies. And before doing their assessments, I write to the Auditor General, the Complaints Commissioner, the Information Commissioner, internal audit, and I get a report from them to say whether they have any serious concerns about the way in which their recommendations are being addressed or not being addressed, and then I hold the chief officers accountable for that. The good news is that in this last go-around here, there was only a few issues that were flagged by our oversight bodies, and those have been resolved or will be resolved shortly. So to answer the member's question, it's all about leadership, focus, holding people accountable, and if you do that, things will change, and like I said, has changed.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to the holding of accounts, as he just mentioned, or to account, I guess you're talking about performance. How is that being done?
Okay. So we have a performance management system. When I took over as head of the civil service about...
Sorry, but we're not just talking about, well, you would be, from what little I know of how it works, chief officers are responsible to you,
Yes, sir.
and below them responsible to the chief officer. But I would imagine that you would pay attention to what happens directly below the chief officers, and if you could speak to how that relates to the total outcome.
Yes, sir.
Because it's not all the time it's the chief officer's fault, as we all know.
Yes, sir. And thanks for that, because you're absolutely correct. So when I took over as head of the civil service, about less than 10% of civil servants had a performance agreement. That has now changed, where we were at 97% last year, and this year I have mandated that we are at 100%. So what that means is that previously, persons didn't have a document that stated very clearly what their priorities should be and what the standards of work should be and what they were expected to carry out, or their projects or duties that they were expected to carry out. That has now changed. That was the first thing. Then we had to focus on doing proper assessments, because having the agreement and then not doing the assessment is really not going to work. So we have now, we're at 96 or 97% of assessments done. And it means that, and then encouraged chief officers, heads of departments, everyone, to be honest in their assessments, to have that hard conversation with employees, to ensure that they understand whether it was felt that they were doing their jobs appropriately or not. We've had that hard conversation. I have met personally with chief officers and heads of departments and emphasized the importance of carrying out the performance management systems effectively. That is working, and we're now seeing more attention to performance, more attention to customer service in the civil service. Is it where I want to be? No. Will we get there? Yes. Will it take some time? Absolutely. Will there be some difficult hurdles to overcome? Yes, but we're going to get there. So what we're doing is carrying out the performance management system. So my first goal was to make sure everyone has them. We're almost there. Then we want to make sure everybody was being assessed properly. We're just about there. Now what we're doing is that I'm sending in our internal auditors to look at the quality of the assessments, to make sure if we're saying that 1 is the very bottom, 5 is the very top, that we want to make sure that everyone is not getting a 5 and everyone's not getting a 1. And from the early indications of the audit, that is not true, is that people are being scored appropriately. So the systems are working, and I'm very encouraged by the progress we have made in this area.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in terms of accountability, because I think in the last session, I asked the financial secretary about just overall accountability in the system. And Mr. Bush said that, and you confirmed that chief officers are accountable to you, deputy chief officers to chief officers, head of departments, etc. Who are you accountable to, sir, in terms of performance and you taking on, because in the context of what we're doing, the recommendations, going through them, deciding which ones you want, and then executing them. Like, I mean, who holds the deputy governor accountable?
That's the job of Her Excellency. So I report to her. She assesses my performance. And yes, I report to her. She's my line manager. We would, so if we got a report from the Auditor General, there would be a discussion with the relevant chief officers, other staff. We can talk to ministers, and then we would formulate a management response.
Sorry. And when you formulate the management response and you put these things in motion, in terms of, I guess, when you're looking at it big picture, what time frames do you normally give yourself to accomplish these things? You know, there are a number of recommendations, and I'm going to slip back here for a minute. There was the, I think in terms of government spending, it's on capital projects, et cetera, there was the procurement office. Like, how long do you give yourself to get things like that in place to say that we've accomplished, you know, something, and then we can take it back to either this committee to say that, you know, here's a follow-up on those responses, or we can take it to the press or other things to say that, you know, from recommendation to acceptance or otherwise to putting a plan in motion and setting a target date. What can you explain that process for me so I can understand?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we try to set realistic deadlines, certainly having a sense of urgency, but we have to know that, we have to recognize that we can't do everything at once. And chief officers are very busy carrying out the mandates of their ministries, and so are heads of departments. So I have to be aware that, you know, when they are now stop doing some of those things to carry out or to effect some of these recommendations, that something will not get done in a timely manner. So we're always looking to make sure that we give realistic deadlines and don't promise things that we can't deliver on. So, you know, looking at a recommendation here, for example, the government will carry out there was a recommendation that says the government should ensure that SAGC's ownership and purchase agreements clearly establish intended results, expectations, and we have a response here as to what we'll be doing with the Public Authorities Law, and that we would be having our meetings in January and a report in March, and we've met those deadlines. The matter is now with the caucus. We also talked about having a rationalization review. That was to be completed in April. I think that slipped a little bit till July, but that's now been done as well. So we try to give ourselves realistic deadlines. Do we meet them all the time? No, but we want to ensure that while we are treating the recommendations with a sense of urgency, we don't want to make promises that we can't keep.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that, Deputy Governor. Mr. Chairman, in the last meeting as well, and I alluded to this earlier, the financial secretary said that there was only basically embarrassment that came in some of these incidents for non-observance or not producing the results. And I know under the PMFL there are certain things, but if you listen to some politicians, and we just come through we're sitting in a house now, you hear, well, no one ever gets fired in government. No one ever pays the price for, not doing their job, so to speak. And that's a common rhetoric out there. Can you explain if someone is found, not carrying out their duties, or there's performance-related issues, if they don't carry out the task that you've set as head of the civil service, what are the procedures you go through, and do you ever fire people? I mean, for non-performance?
The answer to that question is yes, we do terminate people, unfortunately. I was notified of a termination last week. That one was for more of bad behavior, but yes, we do terminate people. The Public Management and Finance Law makes it very clear, Section 22 for chief officers, Section 42 for the rest of the civil service, that you can be terminated for significant inadequate performance. So while there is an element of shame in not doing your job, the real mechanism or the real punishment is termination in accordance with the Public Service Management Law. What that says is that if you find that someone is not performing to the standard that is set by myself or by a head of department or by a chief officer, you will basically put them on a improvement plan. So you will give them an opportunity to improve, set them targets, give them a finite period of time in which to improve. If there's no improvement, then you can extend that for a bit longer, just because you want to work with people, you want to improve them. I've always found it much more rewarding when you can turn someone around, and especially somebody who you feel is trying. It's much more rewarding to turn someone around and move them from being a poor performer to a high performer than just simply cutting them off and kicking them out the door. So I encourage civil servants, chief officers, to work with staff that are not performing to try to raise their performance. But at the end of the day, if they are not performing at the right level, then we should part ways.
To you.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. As far as that Section 22 under the PMFL law, have any of your chief officers raised any concerns about undue political pressure, whether it comes to do with staff or otherwise?
No, sir.
And do you think that there is enough legislation or enough in the law to protect them from that sort of interference?
Yes, sir. The law makes it very clear that the employment, dismissal of civil servants is a matter for myself as head of the civil service, Her Excellency. And if there are occasions when there is political pressure being applied, then there is a procedure where I would bring it to the attention of the minister. If that didn't work, then I would consult with the premier. And if that didn't work, then the governor will get involved. But so far, we haven't had to do that.
Found any time any politician complain about pressure from his civil servants?
No, sir.
You need to answer that one.
Deputy Governor, in the testimony we took on the 3rd, one of the consistent messages that I got from all those who appeared before this committee, and again, I'm probably paraphrasing a bit, but I think one of the consistent messages is that members or people don't seem to understand what these principles of good governance are, and that this report is the first time that they have seen anything really concrete. And there seemed to be a bit of a strong desire to have some guidance, some sort of sensitivity training to these principles and what they really mean in practice for whether it's an SAGC or government ministry or department. How do you respond to that, and do you have any plans to ensure that this is done?
Yes, sir. That is something that I agree with. I think it is something that we need to focus on and to give it more attention. But I can say that we have already done a governance workshop, and where we've focused it so far has been on board members. But following that, and we had a professor come out of the University of the West Indies and conducted training, which was very well received, and we got the vast majority of our board members trained up in governance. But what has been recommended to me after that workshop was that we need to expand that to include top civil servants, HODs, and other persons involved in the management of the civil service to make sure that everyone understands good governance and what is expected of them, and that is now being arranged as well.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to what the Deputy Governor just said, how do you see the various recommendations of the audit in talking about good governance? We recognize that what we now call good governance were things that some of them that we took for granted that you could do. And today they're saying, well, that's not good governance in international standards, and so let's change the way we do business. And so there are several mentions here about how to do that. For instance, and just to draw members' attention to it, that when I got elected in '84 and before, ministers were able to chair various authorities. That was an accepted practice. And I think every minister did. We changed that, I think, well after 2000 and I think after the hurricane anyway, somewhere after that. But certainly it was something that was accepted. At that time, the minister were well briefed because he chaired the meeting. He knew what was going on. He couldn't say that he didn't know, unless, of course, he wasn't at a meeting, and then he should still have been briefed. But that has changed. What I've found is that there are times that you're not briefed. You're not in the know. You are a minister. You are responsible. But because you don't attend the meetings, you don't chair it, things go on, and sometimes you don't know. But it's said, and the audit report comes out and paints you out of black. But at the same time, you really don't know. How do you see the various recommendations being able to improve those sort of situations? One is, of course, the glaring one is that you appoint people to the board that kind of brief you.
Yeah, I mean, people that appoint a board should be carrying out the policies of the government and should not be working against you. So yeah, I totally agree with that. But obviously they have their good governance and fiduciary responsibilities as well. But yes, sir, I totally agree. There's been a huge change and in some cases a learning curve for civil servants and board members. Take, for example, conflicts of interest. That has been a vexed issue for many, many years, because persons will see a application come before them that is for a family member, for example, and they say to themselves, well, I can remain objective and I will do the right thing. And in 99.9% cases, they can do the right thing. But of course, we know that the test for bias is not whether there is bias, but whether there is a perception. And of course, me sitting there looking at an application that affects a close family member, someone outside will say, France can't make an unbiased decision. And that has been a challenge for all of us to hammer in to civil servants, the board members, that the best thing to do is just get up and leave and don't be involved in the decision at all. But most people simply take the view that, I'm honest, I have good integrity, and I can make a decision that won't be biased. And like I said, it's probably true, but the perception is that you won't. So that has been, I think, something that we've had to constantly hammer through to our staff, to board members, because there was a time, as the leader of the opposition says, when those things were not in the public spotlight as they are today, and we've made so many changes in the sake of good governance that it has become almost second nature to sometimes now second guess and saying, am I doing this? Is this good governance? Should I be doing additional checks and balances? And it can affect the timeliness of some of your decisions because you're being overly safe. So it has affected our operations, and that maybe is the price you pay for observing good governance, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Mr. Chairman, in speaking about roles and boards, there was a recent press article about a chairman of the board talking about being able to influence hiring and firing of senior executives below them. When we were in the last session on the 3rd, the Auditor General kind of set out a kind of good governance procedure, and that was a no-no in that instance. And we spoke about board chairmen, et cetera, members getting this training. How are we ensuring that they've taken the training, they've taken it on board, and that it's in line with the procedures that I guess have been stated by the Auditor General and accepted by you as head of the civil service? Like, what kind of checks and balances are there?
Yeah, so that is a deficiency at the moment. What we are doing now is creating, or we have been working very hard on a public authorities bill, because everyone agrees, or certainly I agree, and I know ministers agree, is that there's not sufficient oversight over our SAGCs. And we need to make it very clear what is the minister's responsibility, what is the chief officer's responsibility, what is the board responsibility, the CEO's responsibility. The good news is that all of that is in a public authorities bill. It has been drafted. We've gotten comments from the Auditor General. It has been to caucus twice, and we're hoping to get it back now to Cabinet for final approval in a couple of weeks. And just to say that that bill covers the appointment of board members, terms of board members, job descriptions, mandatory training, role definition I just said recently, ownership agreements, board procedures, personnel management, procurement, rationalization of pay policies, and succession plans. So all of those things in terms of governance is in the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bush?
I think most of us, like you're saying, would like to see some, well, at least I say fresh ideas about how to operate the boards in in relation to the ministry. But if you look at the report, and I thought I saw that somewhere about in the papers where we said we don't need more laws. I think the Auditor General is saying that it is that what is needed, all that is needed, in fact, is better implementation of the current framework. What are the failings then? What's the difference between what you're saying and what he's saying? And I tend to agree, Mr. Chair, that as I said, I would like to see some fresh ideas as to how that operation takes place.
Yes, sir. And just to clarify, so we have, just to go back a bit to what Mr. Conley was saying, was that we need to make it very clear on appointments, for example. So the leader of the opposition will know that that is not consistent at the moment, where we have cabinet appointing some CEOs, the board appointing some CEOs, and we need to standardize that, because in my opinion, the correct procedure is that the board appoints the CEO and the CEO appoints the staff, and the board holds the CEO accountable and does not get involved in the other staffing matters. I think that is the accepted good governance model. But in relation to the leader of the opposition's question in terms of leadership, it's not clear now what the roles are in relation to the SAGCs in terms of what can a minister do, what and should they be able to do more? Should the chief officer have a bit more authority, or what are the direct lines? What the powers should the chief officer have in relation to a SAGC that falls under them? So those things are not clear, and so I'm not sure that there's a particular law that we can enforce better in relation to the SAGCs. Yes, there are ownership agreements, and we can hold them more to account in those ownership agreements. But for the most part, I think this is one area. I generally agree with what the Auditor General is saying, is that in the other areas, we just need to focus on performance and leadership. In this particular area, I think we do need some additional legislation.
Anything else, Mr. Bush?
Just let me formulate where I was trying to get to where I was getting to. And that is, you're saying that because you find, like I guess most of us found, that Port Authority law different from Port Authority, even where there should be similarities. There are differences where we feel as a government that there has to be that set in law across the board. That's, am I right?
Absolutely correct, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I could through you, I'd like to take it back another step. And we heard some of the frustrations from the chairman of the authorities in our last session. But you have, going all the way back to a political campaign, you have a party that publishes a manifesto. That government takes office, so there is a manifesto that says this is what we want to do when we take office. Then annually, there's a strategic policy statement, which is done by caucus and by cabinet, which says this is what the government wants to achieve, the elected government wants to achieve for that year. Actually, before that, you know, the government takes office, they appoint, as you said, either boards, chairmen, or CEOs. How do you see the chief officer in this? What is his role now? How does he react to, okay, party A has won the elections, I have a copy of their manifesto, they come into office, they're busy, they sit in caucus, they sit in cabinet, they make a decision, here's my SPS. How does the strategic policy statement, how does a manifesto, how does all of that get from the elected government through the chief officer to the SAGCs?
Thank you, sir. That's a good question, and it's something that we are continually trying to improve on. And just a few weeks ago, I was talking to our cabinet secretary about it, because normally the cabinet secretary takes the lead on pushing the government's agenda. So from his role as cabinet secretary, he would help push that along, and as head of the civil service, I will then work with him to ensure that the government priorities are our priorities. So, and the cabinet secretary is doing just that, doing a great job in ensuring that we are working to the government priorities, because that's what we are all about, is working to the government priorities. So what happens is that, and Chief Officer and I have had these conversations, is that we should be looking with the help of the Cabinet Secretary on a 6-monthly basis to say, where are we with these particular priorities that the government has set for us? And then make sure then that the SAGCs and the various ministries are working to those priorities. Right now, I don't believe that the chief officers have the necessary powers, authority to make that happen as a priority for SAGC. Whether the chief officer or the minister should have it, it needs to be there. So just to say, Mr. Goff has provided me with a draft version of the Public Authorities Bill. And it says the duties of the chief officer would be to monitor monthly the purchase and ownership agreements to ensure compliance, to ensure that reports and financial statements are presented to the LA in the prescribed format, to ensure that the public authorities identify measured criteria to be adopted and reporting requirements to identify and deliver or non-deliver of the outcome. So I think that is very important, that we give the chief officers that authority so that they can push the government's agenda with the SAGCs.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Deputy Governor, and this is just a quick off general question. Are there NOLA principles of good governance anywhere on the government website?
Yes, they are contained in the Standards in Public Life legislation.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I was kind of thinking that if they're more prominent and somebody can click on, I mean, I use the government website as a great resource for reports and when I'm doing my research and stuff. But if something is there where it's a constant reminder, you know, chief officer, somebody can just go and click right away. Here it is. Here, that, you know, these kind of memory aids would perhaps be something that could go a long way in reinforcing those sort of principles. But my main question was, and I'm thinking balance here now. Right? We hear that the Auditor General's office comes in, they do the reports, they meet and speak, etc. What's your view on that process and how that works? You have an active kind of relationship with that office in terms of, you know, well, a feedback, you know, well, we think you could have done this another way. I mean, is it all one-sided or is there active discussions on refining that process for both sides? Because, you know, to me, since we pay the Auditor General's bills, it's interesting to know what that process is and how it works from the other side of the fence as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And just to say that I think the idea of publishing the Nolan Principles is a good one that I'll take forward. But no, I think so we enjoy a good relationship with the Auditor General. The way in which they do their work is very helpful to us. We don't get these reports cold, so to speak. There is a meeting, we come in and we meet. Don't necessarily like some of the things that they say, but again, that is not the point. That is their job, and we need to take their role seriously. We get to challenge some of the things that they say, and many times we agree to disagree, or we accept that yes, we do. There are valid points that come out of the meetings. But then yes, I think the process is working well. I am very encouraged by the Auditor General and his team wanting to or offering to get engaged with us early on in the processes. For example, major capital projects. The Auditor General has offered his assistance to look at what we're doing with the port, seaport, waste management, early on procurement, what we're doing early on so that we don't end up with a report 5 years later to say that we got it all wrong. And our general will confirm that we've reacted to that very quickly. He's already met with the relevant chief officers. And from my report, it was a very productive meeting. And, there will be subsequent meetings because prevention is better than cure. And I think the Auditor General, yes, while he has a role in terms of, auditing things that have already happened, the more help he can give us early on and steer us in the right direction is better. We don't want to find that we wasted $5 million after it happened if we can save that at the beginning. So I think that intervention is welcomed. I applaud the Auditor General and his team for the work in that area, and the relationship is good. We will agree to disagree on many occasions, but the respect is there, and it's my job to make sure that his recommendations are viewed seriously and properly addressed.
And just again, in the counterbalance, I'll ask the same question to the Auditor General's team.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I would say that we have a good working relationship. We're auditors at the end of the day, and there's always going to be some grit in the oyster at the end of the day, and there's always going to be things we disagree on. But the point is that the reports are provided in draft forms for clearance by the service to ensure their factual accuracy and to get their comments back. The reports are amended for factual corrections and tone, content, depending on the feedback we get from the service, and there will be areas where we just agree to disagree, but we also agree to amend the report as appropriate as well, with appropriate evidence as well. So that is a clear process. To the point that Mr. Manderson's making, just to say, I think we can still continue to refine the process to ensure that it's effective, and I think from my perspective, speedier occasionally and timely, but I think we're moving forward in terms of that sort of process. In terms of the going forward, it's a clear view across audit offices, more globally and internationally, is that we need to try and be a bit more, not more proactive. We always try to be proactive and try and provide advice, but in terms of doing our audit work, especially in the major projects and things like that, and major programs where they're getting implemented, to be in there and do some audit work earlier so that we can provide feedback and to make sure things don't, or to help guide and to ensure that things don't go off course in terms of the major projects, major programs. So that's a clear trend in how we're doing it. It increases the risk from my office about providing a report on something earlier on in the process and then being seen part of the process or whatever else. But there is some risks from our perspective. But in terms of trying to ensure this best use of public resources, I think it's fundamentally important that we get involved at earlier stages, at key stages, not just indiscriminately, but at key stages in each of the major projects, for example, like the port or the waste management, to do some initial audit work and provide feedback to the ministries, to the government, about how things are going and areas for bringing back online or whatever in that sense. So I think it's from my perspective, it's an important step forward, and hopefully will provide clear support for the government in that perspective. And just to reiterate, I've met with the service in terms of the waste management, the ports and the airport so far, and there's intentions to have ongoing meetings and plan when we're going to try and do some initial audit work, at what stages we're going to do that.
But as of right now, it's more of a practice and not set in stone. Meaning that in a perfect world, what would that procedure be every single time with every single department, with every single major project? I mean, if you had a crystal ball or a wish list and you said, I would want the civil service to come to me at my office and talk about these things, and we'd want them set in stone so that this is a policy and procedure going forward, would that be something that would assist the process and hopefully save money in the long term? Or is that something that you might A, not be resourced for, and B, not want to take on the risk for?
To answer that last point first, the question, it depends on how much activity is going on as well. That's the problem. And I only have so much resources, and there's certain parts of my mandate I don't have any flexibility in. So it depends. Those factors come into play. In terms of policy and procedure, I think to a large extent this is down to my mandate and my strategic policy, my strategic direction of the audit office in terms of how we want to go forward. We're moving slightly away from the traditional role of the auditor and how some people would describe it as bayoneting the wounded, coming in after the fact and reporting all the issues that went wrong, with the hope that but also that also has the intention of trying to improve things going forward. So this is a change in tack, and it's a strategic choice that I'm making as the Auditor General, that I think this is an important way to go, and it reflects changes that are in the world as well. I think it's strategically important to ensure that we are seen to be more proactive in trying to help support the effective use of public resources and prevent, to an extent, any waste potentially going forward, rather than coming after the fact once maybe potentially millions of dollars have been wasted and say that you've wasted this and you need to do this. So there's, I don't want to belittle what we did, because I think that's still fundamentally important to come in and say, this is what went wrong, these are the issues we found, and this is what you need to do forward to ensure that you make that you manage resources more effectively. But I think as well we had to come in, especially in these major projects where you can spot key points in the point, like when you can actually do some audit work, and not just advice, so actual audit work, and provide feedback to the service at that point. I think it's important to know that we do have been providing advice on various things, all formal advice to parts of the service anyway. But I think this is more to doing a formal audit work at various points before the completion of a project.
And this is a slight shift, but it goes back, I think, to just timeliness and carrying out under the PMFL. We keep hearing, and we heard in the last with the Financial Secretary, that we're up to date now with mostly with our audits and our financial reports, etc. Is there, and this is Deputy Governor, is there any interaction with the Auditor General's office on the quality of reports? Like when you put these things forward, and is there critique about how they're done across the board? Are there differences in, we know differences in size, so obviously you'd want the same quality person as a CFO across the board, but you wouldn't necessarily put the best person you have in the smallest. What I'm trying to get to is, do you take on critique from the Auditor General's office at the quality of those reports? And then if the quality of those reports aren't up to scratch, then what are the steps to hold those CFOs responsible, get them extra training, or in some instances say, well, maybe this isn't you're not a CFO material. That I want to get into that sort of realm.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir. It's a good question. Yes, we do have those conversations. I have those conversations with the Auditor General. I think he will agree that we have come a long way in the last 4 or 5 years to where we were when the accounts were really in bad shape. I see now in Cabinet and the LA many more audits coming out that are clean, which is where it should be. And so we are now focusing then on, we've got the timeliness down right. We now need to focus on the quality, and that's what we've been doing. And I talk to chief officers and make it very clear to them that if their CFO is continually producing accounts that is getting disclaimed, that is a problem, and that we cannot allow that to continue, and to do exactly what you alluded to in your question, in terms of additional training, additional support, make sure that they have the resources. But at the end of the day, if that's simply not working out, then again, hard decisions to be made. The good news is that I think that the CFO cadre that we have is competent. We've promoted up 2 Caymanians in the last 6 to 8 months. They're doing a fantastic job, and we will continue to do everything we can to raise the performance of our CFOs.
And Mr. Chairman, can I crave your indulgence one more time? In terms of CFO training, right? And this is something I shared kind of just in the lunchroom the other day with members of the Auditor General's office, and I just wanted to ask you formally about this. Is there, I guess, some sort of formal introduction to the PMFL, and would there be any benefit before they take on the job? And would there be any benefit being worked through something like the Auditor General's office in terms of seeing what's going to be expected from the auditing side, getting your teeth, and this is talking about capacity down the road, getting your teeth, cut on the end result before you actually start doing your job. If you get what I'm saying, and that, how do you build capacity from CFOs? And in years past, I know that people used to start off in internal audit and then they moved over and things like that. I mean, how do you see that working and being the best system in there?
Yes, sir, thank you. Where it has to start with is, first of all, getting the right people in the door. So what I have changed along with chief officers is a much more comprehensive and robust recruitment exercise, so that we're just not having someone come in, sit down, do an interview, and says, oh yes, they're qualified. We identify what are the competencies that they need to perform the duties of a CFO, and then we will have a day of testing where we test them on their abilities to do the job. Because like you said, we know where we want them to be. We need to see that if they're not right there now, we're coming in the door, that they will get there. Because we need superstars. We don't need okay people. In order to raise the performance of the civil service, we need superstars. In particular, this area where we have not done well in the past. So we're looking for superstars. The good news is that we're getting them at the CFO level now. We are still struggling to Caymanize the whole cadre, but we will get there soon. So first thing is, yes, we get the right people in with the right skill sets, with the right educational background and experience that can do the job very well. Then we look to see what support that they need, and the orientation, as you said, is critical as well. Because not only do we want to give them orientation about their duties and responsibilities, we want to talk to them generally about the governance, the whole issue of procurement, all these things that they get involved in on a daily basis. We want to make sure that they're up to speed on. So we've done a lot of work in that area, and it is paying its dividends.
And is the Auditor General's office involved in any of that in terms of maybe advisory? And because when I think of a CFO, right, coming from the private sector, it's somebody more than a bean counter. It's somebody more than an auditor. It's somebody that can strategically plan your organization, and each of them have their ministries and it's like. Are we, and you say we're getting great people, and my question would be, are we getting those types of people that can basically take that role, own it, do a lot of the strategic type elements, so that takes the pressure off of chief officers and deputy governors and that sort of stuff, where, you know, yes, they have the aptitude, you induct them into your system, but then they can go off and, you know, produce.
Yes, we are, sir. But we don't consult the Auditor General on our selection. The chief officers have the authority to employ their CFOs, but they must consult with me before they get appointed. And that is similar with heads of departments as well. So all senior appointments within government come through my office. But yes, we are getting the good people. I think the course that is coming up that's being run by the Auditor General Office, the Professional Development Week, is a great thing. And I'm making it mandatory now for a lot of our staff to attend it, because they give great seminars and presentations on that point in terms of management and the abilities that they should have as CFOs. So it's something that I have endorsed along with the Auditor General, and I think it's a great idea, and I will be there for the Professional Development Week.
I just want to make a few points regarding where we are with the financial statements, and then where we the level in terms of where we get to in terms of financial management. I think, and obviously we recognise there's been significant improvements and movement forward with financial statements, but I have to think we have to be cautious in terms of how we say that, because ultimately accountability is not fully restored until we're getting the EPS delivered in the timescales as set out in the PMFL, and that's still a challenge. And it was still the same in terms of some of the other entities as well, because we've still got 2 entities that have been disclaimed in the latest audit opinions, for example, and 2 significant ones. And fundamentally, that's a complete failure for an entity to have a disclaimer of opinion. We receive the financials by the deadline, and so that we're getting that aspect of timeliness is done, but there's still the issue of quality, which affects the timeliness of actually presenting that information to the Legislative Assembly for its use as accountability documents, and also for actually making decision-making with. So there's still some significant issues in terms of that. Now, we're obviously making progress. The numbers we get signed off within the deadline increase year on year, and that's a good thing, and I think that has to be commended. But there's still a way to go to actually achieve that, to a large extent, that full accountability that we all crave and want from that perspective. So lots of progress, but there's still a way to go. And I always say, the accountability is like one of the classic curve that you get. You're doing a lot of work and you're making a lot of improvements, but you're still down there in accountability. And in the last sort of 5%, you'll get that sweep up in terms of getting that full accountability. So it takes time. So it's still a challenge from my perspective. Gratefully, we received, and good credit to the Ministry of Finance, a plan for bringing the EPS into line. And we look forward to moving that one forward in the next, I'd say, year and a half in a sufficient way. But there's still challenges, I think, and I think a lot of that's around the quality of the information in terms of trying to actually get audits completed and actually finalised. You know, sometimes it takes, we get a year from receiving the information to actually get into a position where you can actually put an opinion on it, through various issues. So there's a struggle there. And in terms of financial management and the key issue for us is it's trying to raise the level to the strategic in terms of financial management, and that's still, I think there's still a way to go in terms of that as well, to ensure that the CFOs are able to devote the time and resources and move themselves away from dealing with the day-to-day transactional stuff, which they get caught up in because there's so much of it, and because of the issues that have been faced in the past and stuff like that, to raise it up to being that strategic advisor and to be that safeguard as well, to be the gatekeeper as well for each ministry. That is a clear role, but also be the strategic advisor to the chief officer on financial matters and to their ministers as well, so that they can provide that clear advice, option analysis, whatever, to enable them to make decisions about implementation of policy and actually policy decisions as well.
Yeah. Is there, this may be a question for both, or it is a question for both. Is there an overall government audit manual that everybody conforms to in terms of how the information is presented, what the templates are, that sort of thing, or does each department kind of do their own thing? And if there's not a manual, was there ever any kind of thought of putting that together to bring these things more in a standardized way, so that you can kind of get consistency, be able to extract the relevant information more quickly and succinctly, and is that something that has ever been considered?
In terms of audit manual, if you talk about a finance manual for core government, in terms of actually their policies and procedures for producing information, there isn't a finance manual at this moment in time. And that's something that is coming through the PMFL review, and that's something that needs to be developed clearly to ensure consistency in terms of application of policies, etc., across government. A template was developed for the financial statements to ensure compliance with IPSAS, and that for the core government anyway. So that was there. In terms of the process around the audit, we, for example, send out a requirements list in terms of what documentation, supporting evidence, and whatever else we require for the audit. And in core government, schedules would standardized set of schedules were developed on Excel for presentation to government. Now that was a development, and that started to sort of resolve some of the issues around the supporting documentation. I'm not going to say it's perfect, nothing ever is perfect, and it still probably needs to be developed, and it also depends on the quality of the information that the individual ministries put into it as well, and how easy that is to follow through to source documentation, for example. But that has been an improvement in terms of that, and that has been taken forward. But going back to the core issue about having a clear finance manual, about the policies, processes for just financial management and preparation of financial statements, that is something that needs to be developed.
Agree.
If there are no further questions, then I would like to thank you, Deputy Governor, for being here this morning. Thank you for your candidness of your testimony. And do you have any parting comments for this committee?
Yes, just in closing, I want to say that we have done a significant amount of work following the publication of these reports. You will have heard me say that we have developed a public authorities bill that's going towards going to cabinet shortly. We have trained civil servants in policy development, over 200. That was a recommendation of the Auditor General. We are moving forward with our Director of Procurement Office. That recruitment is going on right now. We are in the process of setting up a Center of Excellence for major capital projects, where we will have a senior project manager and a senior project manager with some project managers to oversee, for example, these major capital projects that we are doing, because the Auditor General has made it very clear, and we accept that we can't ask the chief officer or ministry staff to manage these kinds of projects. We've seen where that model has failed. So we are now setting up a major projects office that will basically oversee these major capital projects. That is ongoing, being finalized. We're recruiting someone to hit that office at the moment, and we've already brought in at least one of the project managers in the Ministry of Health. So that is ongoing. We have did an orientation program for a new government, which was suggested by the Auditor General. We have trained, like I said, Chief Minister of Service in the areas of policy. We have the review of the finance law, which you, Mr. Chairman, is dealing with. So there are so many actions that we have taken in order to address the concerns raised by the Auditor General. We're driving home performance management. We're holding people accountable. The Auditor General has stated that he has seen a dramatic improvement in the quality of our work. We want that to continue. Probably a few more painful reports before we get there, but we will get there. We will produce our consolidated accounts. So, really, sir, I'm excited about the way and in which the civil service is operating at the moment in relation to these matters. Are we perfect? No. Will we ever be perfect? No. But we are certainly much, much better off today as we were a few years ago in terms of the overall performance and compliance with the Auditor General reports. This hasn't happened by itself, and I want to first of all thank the Auditor General and his team for bringing these matters to our attention, for their constructive approach, and to thank chief officers, HODs, for giving this work a priority. Mr. Goff, other persons have been heavily involved in the Public Authorities Bill, and I want to publicly thank Dr. Julia and Mr. Adams from the Turtle Farm for the work that they've done on that. It's been tremendous, and I think when the bill and the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Moxham, for the work they've done on the Public Authorities Bill, I think when that comes to the LA, people will be pleased to see the work that we have done in that area. So, sir, in closing, I want to thank you and the members for your questions and giving me an opportunity to come in and appear before you. And I think you'll be satisfied that the civil service is doing its work and taking the reports of the Auditor General seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And again, thank you for your testimony this morning. You're excused. Committee would like to call its next witness, Mr. Vinton Chinsey. Okay. Anyone else need a bathroom break? Okay, we'll break for 5 minutes.